Well, it's not quite Bobby Ewing and the whole season that was a dream, but 6 days in, the president did a huge about face on tariffs today. And we'll discuss that here on Two Way tonight with peace, love, and understanding, and the presumption of grace for all, and a determination of who the shadow Secretary of the Treasury is. Most people are saying it's Jamie Dimon. We will explain. Thank you for joining. The incredible day. And there's one big story, which is the president's announcement that rallied the markets. They gained back about half. The Dow gained back about half of what it lost since last Thursday, saying the tariffs against China would continue, but that many of the other tariffs against all the other countries, not all of them, but many of them, would come be suspended for 90 days, during which the thought is there'd be a lot of negotiation. This was predicted by many that he would have to back down, but it wasn't clear until he did it today that that was what's going to happen. A lot of credit is going to Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who has been privately advising the president to look for some off ramp since the weekend. And the president today decided to take the off ramp. So we're going to talk about why it happened, what it means, what happens next. Have a couple of great guests. Have a lot of good sound bites from the president. Some of them are funny and interesting, including one that uses the word yippee, which is getting a lot of attention. Other minor stuff in the scheme of things, although not minor really, we'll talk about it too with our guests, is the reconciliation vote in the House, not the final bill, the blueprint that will allow the process to continue, is being voted on the floor this evening. Not sure how long it'll take, but the speaker is rolling the dice to try to pass the bill. And It's going to be interesting to see, but I don't think it's going to fail. And uh, I earlier in the week, my analysis was that the tariff stuff was helping the president and the speaker pass the reconciliation package because they were going to say to Republicans, "There's all this chaos, there's all this uncertainty. We need to do something to change the subject and to move the party forward together." The reality was the chaos and the perception of incompetence was actually hurting their chances, giving some of the potential defectors a chance to blame the tariff chaos for their potential no votes. And so I think that roughly the rough breakdown of why the president changed course. I think 50% was the bond market, which again, if you're the Treasury Secretary or a president who cares about the iron laws of international economics, what was happening with bonds was just not sustainable and could do some serious damage. About 25%, I think, was the problem with reconciliation, that it was endangering the passage of reconciliation, and that was that's a big part of his agenda too. And then 25%, I think, rich people, including Jamie Dimon, talking directly to the president and publicly uh, uh, in ways that I think made him realize that this was not sustainable as a matter of governance. Um, some of the people who were very critical of the president, Bill Ackman, for instance, who called for a 30, 60, or 90-day pause, have been very gracious today in interviews and on social media. Bill Ackman said, masterful art of the deal. Maybe I missed the tweet where he said, "Thank you for taking my advice," but people are being pretty gracious, and there's massive sighs of relief coming from the wealthiest Americans and the people in industry who really want the policy to change. Though already lots of speculation, lots of mocking of the president, lots of speculation about whether there's long-term damage, what will happen over the 90 days, lots of questions about how the negotiations will actually take place. We're talking about potentially 100 or more bilateral discussions. And the question is, who in the administration will take the lead on that? Not just individuals, but will it be the White House, Commerce Department, Treasury, USTR? Lots of unknowns there. And and again, people are wondering, will we be doing all this again in 90 days? But for now, it'll be fascinating to see what happens with markets. Lots of speculation about China and about whether this whole thing was engineered on purpose to create the narrative that Secretary Bessent talked about today in the White House driveway and to television cameras and reporters, that this is now China against the world, and the United States is united with everyone against China and their unfair trading practices. and that it's trying to also and there's all sorts of theories here, some of which I confess I don't fully understand, but it's also being seen by some as a very clever way to try to minimize the chances that China would try to take Taiwan, which military planners, we've talked about this here before. If China wants to take Taiwan, it'd be very difficult for the United States, the West, the other Asian countries allied against China to stop China from taking Taiwan. And there's a theory that this whole thing is about Taiwan. I don't quite understand that. I can tell you that it's going to be interesting to see when we see more reaction. There's been some, how the Canadians feel about this, how the Europeans feel about it, and how the president explains more fully what he did. As I said at the White House today, he did that. So, going to show you some sound bites from the president. Going to bring in our two great guests in a moment, Steve Elmendorf and Batya Ungar-Sargon, to give their views primarily about tariffs, but also I want to talk to them about reconciliation. Steve used to work on Capitol Hill as a senior aide to a very senior Democrat, so he knows quite a bit about it. Then, as always, we're going to want your questions and comments. So if you're here on the two-way platform and you want to be in on the conversation, please raise your yellow hand, and we'll get to many of you soon. If you're watching on YouTube or on X, please don't raise your hand and don't put smack in the chat. And wait a couple days before you check your 401k, but it could be, for many, happy days are here again. All right, there's so many pieces of sound I could show you from the president. He talked, I believe, twice, once at an outdoor event with some racers, and then again in the Oval about an hour and a half ago. So we could listen to the president for hours, hyperbolically, talk about this, but I'll play a few sound bites for you. Here is number one, the president saying he made the changes because people were getting yippee.
You started the morning saying be cool, and then just a few hours later, there was a pause put in on the tariffs. Can you walk us through your thinking about why you decided to put a 90-day pause?
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know. They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, you know, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day. And somebody had to do it. Roger actually said it. Charles Schwab was here a little while ago, one of the great financial people, and he said he's been waiting for 40 years for somebody to do what I did over the last month. And if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have a country. It wouldn't be sustainable. So I'm honored to have done it. And, you know, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75, and they all want to come, and they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury. We have our great senators here and congressmen. They'll call John, they'll do somebody, they'll go through somebody, but they're all calling, how do we do this? They all want to make a deal. Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible.
All right, so that wasn't the Oval. That was the outdoor event. He also talked in the Oval. Let's play number 4, please, Sam.
Be made with every one of them. A deal's going to be made with China. A deal's going to be made with every one of them. And there'll be fair deals. I just want fair. They will be fair deals for everybody. but they weren't fair to the United States. They were sucking us dry, and you can't do that. You know, we have $36 trillion of debt for a reason. We don't have it there for fun. They have it for a reason. And people took advantage of our country, and they ripped us off for decades. I've been thinking about this for decades. If you ever saw me on television, I was young like these guys. And it was a good old days, I'll tell you, Roger. But I was like these guys, young, and I was talking about it. Nothing changed, and nothing was done about it. Then I did it. In my first term, I did it, and did it well. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China and others, and I started the process, but then we had to fix up from the COVID mess caused by China. We had to fix up from that, and we did a good job of doing it. And when we handed back the reins after a rigged election, and when we handed back the reins, the stock market was higher than it was before COVID coming in. So, you know, we did a great job, but we didn't have time to do the big thing, which we're doing now. And it's, you know, it's like a patient is sick, you have to do surgery. The patient is very, very sick. And Joe Biden handed us over a country that was in very serious trouble, economically and in every other way. They let China run away with things. They let other countries run away with things.
So not a lot of mention there of onshoring or the supply chain or reducing the deficit through tariffs. Just about making fair trade deals with other countries, and maybe that'll be enough. I still worry about how these negotiations can deal with non-tariff barriers, but we'll see. All right, let's bring in our guests. Steve Elmendorf, longtime Democratic strategist, worked, as I said, amongst others, for Dick Gephardt on Capitol Hill. Dick Gephardt in his time was interested in tariffs and fair trade. And Batya Ungar-Sargon, journalist, author, now doing excellent work at the Free Press. Both of them here with us tonight. Steve, start with you. Just your reaction to what the president did. Is it good policy, good politics, and what happens next?
Well, it's certainly not good policy. Whether it's good politics or not, I think the jury is out. I think, you know, and I'm not, as you know, you said, I worked for one of Congress's leading protectionists. I'm not a hardcore free trader. I think the problem with what he's done over the last couple of weeks has been the uncertainty of it all. And, you know, both individuals and businesses need to make plans. And the policy he's articulated and his people have articulated in many cases different policies and different plans, and they still are, is not providing anybody with any certainty. We should be negotiating trade deals with our allies. But we should be negotiating them in a process that makes sense and that has a timeline and that we know what's going on, not a tweet that comes out after the market is collapsing, a tweet that comes out and then the market spikes up. It's too much uncertainty for people in the economy who run businesses, not just big businesses, but small businesses and small investors who have decisions they have to make.
If the market comes back, all the wealth is restored, you know, shortly. Is there any cost to the American economy for doing it the way he's done it?
Yes, there's definitely cost because, again, you know, if you're saying all the car companies need to onshore everything, which isn't really doable, but they can start to move stuff onshore, you have to, you don't just like build a factory in a week. It takes time and it takes investment to make a decision to build a factory and land to buy and lots of things to do. And so the business likes to know what is the plan.
But we're not worse off on those issues now than we were a week ago, are we?
You may be in that businesses are making decisions. They can't make decisions. We're better off if business understands what the rules of the road are, whichever, whether the rules of the road are something they like or don't like, but where we have some sense of what is the economy going to be doing for the next.
Well, sure, but we knowingly elected a president who's not consistent and linear.
That doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Okay, well,
I think some more consistency and being more linear would be good.
Well,
one other thing, Mark, I think we need to point out.
Yeah.
Many people like to talk about how the markets don't matter to like anyone other than the rich. And the reality is in our economy today, when people are in 401ks and don't have defined benefit pensions anymore, mostly, the markets are important to a lot of people. The markets are important to class people of all sorts who the loss of wealth and their retirement savings over the last weeks has been a really
Right.
devastating
I agree. I
psychologically and
agree.
potentially economically.
I agree. But let me just play devil's advocate sophist with you for a minute.
Okay.
Let's say the moves of the last 6 days allow the president to make terms more favorable to the United States with many countries than he would have been able to make from a standing start a week ago. That's possible, isn't it?
It's possible. It's also possible they make worse deals.
Right. Okay. So we'll see what happens. Thank you, Steve. Always grateful for you being here. Batya, thank you for being here. You've been pretty supportive. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You've been pretty supportive of the president's policies for the last week. Are you happier today, or you were happier yesterday, and why?
Okay, first I want to say two things before I answer that. The
Yeah.
first is, Mark, the grace you have brought to this conversation in trying to, if there's like the divide between the people who see this as impacting everybody and the people like me who see this as Main Street versus Wall Street, the grace you have brought in trying to not caricature the position I have has made me want to be better. I haven't 100% succeeded in bringing that same level of grace because I'm a bit of a pugilist, but I just wanted to point that out and thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
it
that.
because I
Thank you.
watch it
Very nice
every
of you.
morning and it really sets the tone, I think, for a lot of us in the industry. And the
Thank
second
you.
thing I want to just say before I answer is the gap between the private messages I have gotten from thousands and thousands of regular people across the country who have very little and are willing to sacrifice a lot for this agenda and the like wall to wall rage that's been directed at me from the expert journalist class is remarkable. Like there's just I cannot even convey to you how different that like and that is the problem I think right there with our industry is that the journalists are in the haves class. They don't get how most Americans see this, which is a lot of people with very little are willing to sacrifice quite a bit for the future of this country. And they see the people in Wall Street who will never not be rich whining about the kinds of sacrifices for the future of this country. So I just wanted to say that, like that,
I love what you said. I agree with it. I think it's so important you said it. The press bias on this is just out of control.
out of control.
But you said it's most people in America, and I'm just quibbling with you. I'm not sure it's most.
I didn't say
It's
most. I didn't say most. I
you
said a
did, you
lot.
did, you did. You misspoke. That's okay.
Okay,
You
sorry.
meant a lot,
I
which
didn't
is
mean
great.
to. I didn't mean to.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Live
Um,
is live. But I appreciate what you're saying, and as always, I'm encouraging people in our business to be a little self-reflective and just their failure to cover this. They act like they're everybody's Paul Gigot. Everybody is a Wall Street Journal editorial board member or a billionaire, and that's the prism through which we should view it. And you praise me, I'll praise you. Your mental courage, professional courage, intellectual courage to say what you think and not worry so much about people attacking you is fantastic. One of the many reasons I admire you.
well,
Now answer my
I don't see most of it because I don't read my mentions
yeah.
on Twitter, but then
Yeah.
sometimes someone I follow
Yeah.
will be, and then you
Yeah.
see, okay. All right,
Yeah. All
answering the
right. Answer your
question.
question. Are you happy
Okay.
with the change? Are you happy with the change, or you preferred yesterday?
I'm happy with the change. This is kind of what I think might be happening, although admittedly this is a very like generous reading of what just happened. It seems to me like under the advice of Scott Bessent, what Trump is now doing is pivoting. But he's pivoting to a position, I think, of trying to create almost a global embargo on China to the benefit of the US. And the way that he has done that is he sort of picked up a bat and said to the entire economic global order, that's a really nice stock market you have there. It would be a shame if something happened to it. And now they know the table stakes, right? When these people show up to negotiate, and he can now say, look, this is what we're doing. And I think, the criticism that you guys already brought up, which is that there were sort of conflicting things here, right? You can either reshore manufacturing or you can solve the trade deficits, but you can't do both, right? When you start making deals.
I disagree with that,
Okay,
but
so I think that those are not in conflict at all because, of
yeah.
course, what we want is better deals with Europe, and what we want is for China to stop producing everything, right? So we want to reshore from China to have better deals with trading partners like Europe or across the world. So to
Yeah.
me, it seems like also each of these figures, like Lutnick, Bessent, Navarro, Musk, and Rubio were each given a different rationale to go out and defend, right? So you had Lutnick making the reshoring argument, Bessent making the fairness and the Main Street argument, Navarro making the revenue argument, which, Mark, I totally agree with you. I think that the point of that was to get them through reconciliation and be like, look, we're going to bring in all this money. And as soon as that happened, I think Trump was going to, start making those deals. And then Musk just being the no, and then Rubio, the national security argument. And so each of them went out and had their role to
Yeah.
play. And Trump was able to choose basically which of those won the day, which in the end was Bessent.
Right. So, Batya, how would you characterize what the president's current position is on the tariffs?
I think he's trying to create a kind of soft global embargo on China to elevate US manufacturing and to create the incentive to reshore. You played this clip of Elizabeth Warren this morning, and I think this actually is very important. She said, "We actually really like the idea of tariffs, but you have to lay the groundwork first. You have to build the factories first. What factory was going to reshore like voluntarily? How do you
Right.
get them to do that? Like that's what Trump figured out is like there has to be multiple avenues to make this happen. No one is going to do that voluntarily. And of course, Elizabeth Warren did not have an answer for how you get them to do that voluntarily.
Right. Steve, I want to retrot a little bit of the ground we're already on. Leave aside the chaos, leave aside the fact you don't like Trump's policies in general.
Mhm.
And leave aside even the last 6 days, just the current policy is in 90 days, if countries don't negotiate bilateral deals that reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers, the US will put tariffs on, and that there are going to be a lot of tariffs on China. And we're saying to China, we're now in an existential struggle with you. How do you feel about that policy? If Kamala Harris or Dick Gephardt as president had adopted that policy, what would you think of that? Again, leaving everything else aside.
I think our goal should be to negotiate free trade agreements. We negotiated free trade agreements. Donald Trump negotiated a free trade
Yeah,
agreement that used to
but
be NAFTA.
that's what he says he's going to do now.
Well, we'll see if he can do it.
Right.
I don't,
But
I'm not
again,
against
just
that goal.
but in the context of that goal, which you're not just not against, you're for, right? And you're for having them done on the most favorable terms possible to the United States,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, when I worked for Dick Gephardt, we used to do we argued for free trade agreements that have protection for labor, protection
Right.
for the environment,
Right.
protections
So
for our interests. Yes.
so if Kamala Harris had won and
Mhm.
she had come out and announced, said in 90 days, if you don't have a free trade deal with us, we're going to put tariffs on you because you're treating us unfairly, tariff and non-tariff barriers.
Mhm.
And we're putting tariffs on China right now, the way President Biden did and President Trump did, because China's a special case, and we're ready to negotiate bilateral deals with everybody. I think I don't want to presume, but it seems like you'd be for that.
No, I'm not opposed to that.
No, but be more
But I don't think
be
we
more
should have
charitable.
had the last 6
Well,
days
I
or
understand,
the
but
last
I
several
understand.
months
I
of
understand,
uncertainty.
but I understand you're against uncertainty, and I am
And
too.
you're not going to be able to negotiate, Mark. And the reality is, in 90 days, you are not going to be able to negotiate all these deals. It's
Well,
going to be a longer
well,
timeline to do it.
yeah,
That's fine.
but they can
Uh,
give individual extensions.
I-
I just think for someone like you who's been a supporter of great trade deals for the US to try to deal with this systemic decades-long unfairness, you don't like the way he ended up, but he's ended up in a place now where he's going to be negotiating from a position of strength, having scared the bejesus out of everybody.
We'll have to see what the deals are. And
We will. We
I'm
will.
against the unilateral authority that the president has on this. A lot of
Yeah.
Republicans in Congress have
Yeah.
done that. Again, when I worked in the Congress, we had negotiated NAFTA, and it had to be voted on by the Congress. I think they should have to do deals that get voted on by the Congress. This unilateral trade authority to the president is not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, I was thinking about this afternoon. I meant to raise it earlier, but I'll raise it now. And then we're going to get to your question. So please raise your hand if you want to be in the conversation. We've got one case, and the Chamber of Commerce was thinking about bringing another one to try to challenge the president's using this emergency authority. Given the delay, do you think those cases will proceed, or do you think they'll be withdrawn?
I don't know enough about the legal
Yeah.
situation.
Batya, any thoughts on that?
I don't know anything about it either.
All right. All right. As always, raise your hand if you want to be in on the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. As I unmute you, please say where you are, what's on your mind. And Richard is desperate to be involved. So, Richard, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind after you unmute.
Hi, Richard. I'm from Delray Beach, Florida. And my insight into Donald Trump, it might be generous, is that you should read The Maltese Falcon because he reminds me of Sam Spade, the detective, where he just throws a wrench in the works, watches what happens, what people do, and then makes assumptions and decisions from there. And I don't know. That's my 2 cents
Okay.
on everything he does. He just throws a wrench,
Yeah.
chaos erupts, and then he kind of like goes in a direction from there.
Yeah. That's great. The uncertainty that Steve loathes. Batya, what do you think of that wrench theory, Maltese Falcon reference?
I can tell you just how the people who reach out to me describe what they just witnessed, which is they never thought in their lives they would see an American president pick them over Wall Street. And the guts that that took and the not backing down. And I think it's very telling that the Democrats don't have like a theory of mind, a coherent theory of mind as to why Trump did it. Like they're sort of the explanations you hear from Democrats about why he did it are kind of they're insane. They're like he's just insane. He's just trying to destroy because for a decade their only explanation for why he did anything was, well, he's on the side of the rich. He's doing it for his rich buddies. And here he was taking on the entire international global order on behalf of Main Street.
Yeah.
And they just were, there was a shock about that. And like they'll never forget what that feels like.
Right. Steve, I'd love for you to comment on that. Can you make the case that this was not Trump siding with Main Street over billionaires? Or
Yeah,
there's...
I don't think this is good for Main Street. I think if you look at many businesses, many small businesses, tariffs are not good.
100%. But I understand.
I dismiss, Mark, this whole notion that this is about Wall Street. Again,
Well,
as I said at the beginning,
I
have
totally...
a lot of friends I talk to too
Yep.
who are not rich and who don't live in Washington. And I'm telling you, there are a lot of people in this country who are in the middle class,
100%.
401k,
Steve,
invested in the stock market.
100%. And I think there are more people on your side than Batya on this point.
And there are people who own coffee shops, Mark.
100%.
Like, what are these tariffs going to do to my coffee?
Steve, 100%. But he did side against the billionaires. That's the only point I want you to address. The billionaires didn't want him to do this, and he did. So you think it's misguided, but he
want him to do what? What he did today?
No, they didn't want him to do what he did last Wednesday, and he still did
I think it was more. I don't think it's just billionaires who didn't want him to do tariffs.
I know, but it included billionaires.
Farmers? How about farmers?
Right.
Steve,
but why did he do it, Steve? Steve, why do you think he did it?
Why do I think it's not for me to decide why Donald Trump does things. I have no idea why he does things.
Okay, but are this is proving my point a little bit.
The point is what he was doing was not a good thing for the American economy, for the American worker, for the American business.
You and Donald Trump disagree on that, but he did side against what the billionaires wanted him to do.
I try my best to zoom out.
Billionaires, not all billionaires.
All right, Richard, thank you. I did my best. Richard.
I try my best to zoom out from like the media prism of like what's happening now and kind of have a historical context. But 5 years ago, Wall Street was perfectly fine with shutting down both the global economy and Main Street forcefully with police powers.
Yeah.
And so when they're critical of things like this, I'm just like, it's not my first rodeo.
Yeah.
We've done worse.
Yep. Richard, thank you. Great points. Love having you on. Thank you so much. Matthew, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind, please.
I'm from New York. Thank you for having me on the show. First of all, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you, Batya. I've listened to you for a very long time, and I appreciate how vociferous you've been on this issue. I understand the politics of this issue. I do not understand the policy of this issue. I hardly profess to be an expert in macroeconomics, but it seems to me pretty elementary that if you want to help Main Street, and I appreciate the deindustrialization of America and how profoundly that has hurt Main Street in America, it suggests to me that the way to do that is with an industrial policy. It is not to do it by imposing tariffs. I fail to understand how it is by taxing the importation of goods. And by the way, I completely appreciate your point about national security and about why it's really important in a very select number of industries to protect those industries because of how vital they are and how supply chain disruptions could end up harming American national security. But what I don't understand is let's say, how are we bringing back the great glory days of the 1950s when America still was the leading car manufacturer simply by imposing tariffs? Isn't the way to compete internationally by investing in infrastructure, by investing in education, by making our workers the best and the brightest in all of the world and incentivizing businesses to locate here rather than tariffs? Isn't that the best way?
Great question. Batya and then Steve. Thank you for that, Matthew.
Great question, and also thank you for your kind words. Donald Trump is not a leftist. He is a protectionist. And so I think this is the thing with the Elizabeth Warren. Like, there's only one way, if you are not a leftist, there's only one way to get businesses to behave in a certain way. I guess there's two ways. There's the carrot and then there's the stick. And I think in Donald Trump's mind, tariffs are kind of a little bit of both. They create a massive incentive because it's going to become more expensive if you don't do it. If you don't start reshoring, there's going to be costs associated with that. And then, of course, he promised to bring down the corporate tax to 15% for anybody who brings manufacturing back here. And I'll just note, it's already working. I mean, he's already attracted $1.2 trillion in manufacturing committed since his inauguration. So it's already sort of working and doing that promised thing. Yeah, industrial policy is great. I'm a leftist, so I love that stuff. Sure, let's like throw money at the problem. But he's a Republican. And so they're thinking, what can we do that to use the market itself in order to make businesses behave in the ways that we want them to? Is there a way that we cannot use the force of the government, but rather an incentive structure to get out of this codependent relationship with China, which has been just like disastrous? And this is the thing about it. We all agree on what the problem is, right? But there's just no other compelling solutions that I have heard. I mean, the Democrats kind of gave up on this. And so, I think for him, the tariffs do a whole bunch of things at once. They make it expensive not to manufacture here. So we have the reshoring piece, the national security piece. I mean, if you think about it, China is our greatest adversary. And we literally rely on them to build the ships we would need in order to fight them if, God forbid, it ever came to that. It's crazy. They exported, maybe by accident, maybe not, a bio weapon, basically. And we relied on them for the pharmaceuticals and the vaccines to fight it. It's insane, but no one's talking about it. You have to make it so that these companies, through their own free will, have enough incentive, carrot or stick, to stop behaving in the way that their shareholders want them to because it makes the biggest profit. That's kind of, I think, the argument behind the tariffs.
Mark, can I ask Steve a
you're making
question?
the leftist argument about the.
So, Steve,
Yes.
Donald Trump.
I remember
Huh.
Dick Gephardt back in the day. I mean, I remember when he ran for president. I followed his career closely. Did he evolve in his opinion about tariffs? Because so much of today with regard to China reminds me of the period when he was prominent in politics, when we had this very issue with Japan.
I think he has had a consistent position for a long time, which was we should try and negotiate fair and free trade deals with other countries. They should be negotiated in such a way that they have protection for labor, that they have protection for the environment, that we are raising the standard of living for all the world, not bringing the standard of living down in our country. And that's what I wish Donald Trump was doing that on a consistent basis across a whole bunch of countries. I happen to think it should be done in consultation with Congress, as we did with NAFTA and USMCA, which Donald Trump negotiated. But I don't think we should have unfettered free trade. We should just have a rational system of negotiated deals with other countries.
Steve, there is another thing that Donald Trump believes that I believe Mr. Gephardt believed, if I remember correctly, which is the insidiousness of the non-tariff barriers, right? He would talk about the way the Japanese system was rigged beyond tariffs to keep America out, right?
That can be part of the negotiation. That's why we used to be criticized for insisting on labor standards in negotiation that protect workers.
I understand.
That's a non-tariff barrier.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's a non-tariff barrier.
It's not a tariff issue.
It's not a tariff issue, but it's an issue of equity. But
Yeah.
what I'm talking about is, and again, maybe I'm misremembering, but I'm pretty sure I remember him talking with great specificity about the Japanese domestic economic system, where it was impossible to penetrate because of bureaucratic rules that were intended to keep America from trading there, right?
Right.
He talked about that in 1988. We didn't have a single president until now who had a theory of the case about how to change that in a pretty fundamental way. So I understand all the things
We
you
should
don't
have
like.
elected Dick. We should have elected Dick Gephardt president, Mark,
Yeah.
as you know.
Art of
But
the deal,
the
Missouri's
country
got.
would be a better place.
All I'm saying is to try to find a little commonality here is
Uh-huh.
Donald Trump is unlike every president who's been president since 1988 when Dick Gephardt ran and lost. Donald Trump has a theory of the case that says the way to deal with the non-tariff barriers is to have leverage over these countries to say no mas. There's no more hiding behind these bureaucratic rules that are designed insidiously to keep us out. And I'm going to negotiate that. Now, you're right. We have to wait and see if he actually does. But to me, at least part of you should be celebrating the achievement of the Gephardt desire to unmask all these insidious things.
That I'm for negotiating trade deals. I just
I
don't
know.
think it should be done in a haphazard,
Right. And without congressional involvement.
without congressional involvement.
All right. Matthew, thank you for coming on. Grateful to
Thanks,
you.
Matthew.
Let's stay in New York City because I like to have people to the left of Steve Elmendorf and David, self-described radical left lunatic. David, you gonna watch Bernie Sanders tonight on CNN in his town hall? You gonna watch that? Gotta.
I did not realize there was a town.
There was. Do you still pay for CNN?
Yes,
All
actually.
right. Bernie's got a town hall tonight. I'll be curious to see what he has to say. Welcome in. David lives in Brooklyn, USA. And he's here, and the floor is yours, sir. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that listening to Batya on this makes me sad because I have a lot of respect for the diagnosis that she's given of, what's wrong with our economy and the ways in which both parties, and especially the Democrats recently, have failed. And she actually has the same diagnosis as Bernie Sanders, which is the Democratic Party lost the election because it has left the working class behind over the past few decades. So her diagnosis is correct, and I respect that. And I think she's very eloquent and very right on in her analysis. And that's why I find it rather sad that she has looked at what has transpired over the past week and doesn't realize that what we're dealing with is an absolute shambles. I think it was described by some of the Pod Save America guys as possibly the dumbest thing that any American president has ever done. They suggested that maybe the Iraq War was a bigger mistake than the initial tariff announcement by Donald Trump. But, I think it's neck and neck between those two incredibly destructive, incredibly stupid, incredibly misguided ideas. And the fact that he's taken it all back a few days later, indicates to me that, I think he was being told by some of his advisors that we were facing a repeat of the financial crisis of 2007, or maybe something even worse. And that's why he blinked. I don't know, Mark. What do you think that's the impetus?
Again, I think it's 50%. I think it's 50% bond market, 50% rich people, 50% reconciliation. But David, I understand
150, Mark.
You like Steve. I'm sorry, 50, 25, 25.
Okay.
You like Steve.
You can have your math. You can have 150.
No, 50, 25, 25. You like Steve don't like the chaos, and you don't like the impact of the chaos, and I totally respect that. I'm saying that gratuitously. Totally respect it. As Joe Biden would say, I'm not kidding. But where we are now, it appears that Steve's concerns about 401ks and uncertainty for small business notwithstanding, it appears that he may be able now to negotiate deals that'll be good for working people. That's his stated desire. So as much as you dislike Donald Trump, don't you want to be optimistic that maybe we have an American president who's a populist, who talks like Bernie Sanders on a range of issues, and maybe he'll actually deliver for working people? Don't you think it's possible? Wouldn't you like to hope it's possible?
Would I like to hope that it's possible? Yes, I would
And
like
and that
to.
and that the facts and that the facts and
Do
that
I
the facts
think
and
that it's
evidence the
possible? No,
facts the
not a
facts and
chance.
evidence suggest he might be able to do that.
Not a chance.
Not a
No,
chance. Okay.
no,
But
because
yeah,
what
go
we're
ahead.
dealing with here is the madman theory, a la Richard Nixon, which is, the whole world looks at him and says, we don't know what to expect, so we all have to cower, which they're not doing. Or the 3D chess. I think Batya is actually endorsing the 3D chess thesis, which is, all of this was planned out and it's all methodical and it's all going the way it's supposed to. And I think if you just look at it day by day, you realize no,
David, what's your view of
not how it
Scott?
transpired.
What's your
That's
view of
not the
Scott?
history.
What's your view of Scott Besant's level of sophistication?
Oh, I mean, I feel for him. He obviously thought all along that he was dealing with a madman, and now he's managed to get the madman off the cliff. But he's only off the cliff for 90 days. So
Okay. Steve and then Batya, react to what David said, please.
Again, David's saying much of what I'm saying, which is I just think we are in there is not a plan of what to do. And I'm not against them negotiating a plan, but this veering back and forth on very significant decisions have a real impact on the economy, and not just on Wall Street, but have a real impact on regular people. All people have a real impact on small businesses, on elderly people, on everyone. It's not the way to run the government. I know that a lot of my friends who like Donald Trump don't like the government, but the reality is, if you're making big decisions about the state of the economy that impact people's life, it helps to have a plan and have sophisticated people helping you, and have political support from the Congress. This whole ignore the Congress. I know I worked in the Congress. I like the Congress. It happens to be controlled by Republicans at the moment, many of whom don't like what Donald Trump is doing. But that's our system of government, is you have three branches of government, and you do better running the government if you consult with the other branches before you do things.
Well, we haven't had a president in 50 years who believes that,
That is
unfortunately.
not true, Mark. That is not true.
Really? Which of our recent presidents has prioritized consulting with the co-equal branch?
I think Joe Biden consulted with the co-equal branch a lot. I think George Bush did. I worked after 9/11 in the government and spent a lot
After
of time with
9/11.
George W. Bush,
After 9/11,
who
I
I didn't
agree.
particularly like, but he spent
Yeah.
a lot of time consulting with us in the Congress, in the minority.
Yeah. He's a very likable guy. I'm surprised you didn't like him. Batya, reaction to what David said. I know you don't like to make people sad, so
I don't like to make people sad.
hopefully you can cheer him up.
Um, Trump won with people who make under $100,000 a year. It's he won the working class, the multiracial working class, 25% of Black men, but the majority of Hispanic men. It's a very working class community. So, and we know that about half of Americans have a 401k. So certainly there's some overlap there between people who are, working class and have a 401k. But most people who don't have 401ks, people are really broke. And if you're broke, seeing the braying on Wall Street and comparing how Trump just went out day after day and said, kiss my butt, to what Obama did in the 2008 financial crisis, where they bailed Wall Street out and they let people just lose their homes. That is, I think, what it looks like to Main Street. And um, like the economic theory here, it may not work out. We may not be able to reshore thousands and thousands of factories. He will get better trade deals. But again, I think the imagery there of him standing with the little guy, that is how the little guy sees this, and him giving the finger to the billionaires who actually went out on a limb and alienated all of their rich Democrat friends and supported him. There is something about that is just I didn't think, I and many other people did not think that kind of an image was possible in this country again, that the person with power did not feel that they had to consult Wall Street before doing anything. And again, just this divide of hearing from people who have nothing, who keep saying, you know what, I'm willing to pay more for things if it means my kids have a future. And then the richest people who, no matter how this goes, will never not be rich, braying about losing money, which is never going to impact how their lives actually look. Like that is what this moment signifies to me.
David, thank you. Grateful to you always for coming on. At the risk of ruining the episode, but in the spirit of the program, here's the question I want you two to grapple with, Steve, first. You're both very smart. You both understand the working class in America pretty well for privileged people. Um, and and yet, Steve, your emphasis is on the uncertainty and damage and anxiety caused for working class people, small business owners, et cetera, by the tariffs, uncertainty, 401k, et cetera. And Batya's emphasis is on the way that these could help people who otherwise feel pretty hopeless about the long term and about their kids' future. So I don't think you guys have different facts. So I'm just trying to figure out not just what separates the two of you, but what do you think separates if we went to Denver or Akron and we found people on the street and they were demographically, economically, educationally the same, what would separate the ones who say, go Trump, go, this is a great idea, from those who say this is the biggest disaster ever? Like, is it their fidelity to Trump? I don't think so, because we've had plenty of people on this platform who were three-time Trump voters who didn't like what he was doing. What separates you two, and what separates people in general on this issue?
I think there are a lot of people in the country who benefit from free trade. Again, we need to negotiate deals with countries and have a fair trade deal. But if you look at the products people buy and the price of those products and the businesses, many small businesses, many people run, they benefit from this.
But there are people who benefit from it. We all benefit from it. Every one of us benefits from it. So that's not the differentiator. It's not, do you benefit from free trade or from global trade or not? Because we all benefit from global trade in a way. But there are people who Batya talks to and I talk to and who come on this platform who benefit from global trade, but say this is not sustainable long term. Typically, they'll say for supply chain, national security, and having good paying jobs in the United States.
I think that varies country by country, Mark. I think it varies deal by deal. Because again, I don't think we should have a one size fits all policy. We should
I understand,
country by country figure out
what is it about? What is it that's dividing America here? We all benefit from global trade. We all want better national security, better supply chain. We all would like there to be higher paying manufacturing jobs in the United States. So why do some people feel so passionately on one side and some on the other?
We are a divided country, Mark.
Well, but again, this division is not red-blue. That's the thing.
And
this
I
is
also
not
don't
just
think this division, I try to be, I don't assert that like all working class people are one way or all rich people are one way.
Yeah.
The reality is Donald Trump didn't win the election 70-30. He won at 51-49. He didn't win the working class 80-20. The working class was closely divided, a little more than the 51-49. It is a divided country. People have different sources of information, different circumstances. They live in different places.
All right, Batya, Steve.
I knew why everybody felt the way they do.
Steve has confessed he cannot look into the soul of his fellow Americans. Are you able to solve this mystery?
I am. I think if you means tested this, the $100,000 a year would be a good marker, but also a college degree is going to be the #1 predictor for whether people approve of this or not, because globalization really hurt people who work with their hands and really benefited people who have a college degree. If you work in the knowledge industry, you are the consumer of low-wage labor. So mass migration helped you a lot, and you're the consumer of cheap goods from China, and you didn't pay the price. You didn't lose the factory. You didn't lose the ability to have the American dream, basically. Like the problem is that working class people, they're not poor, but their purchasing power since the 70s has plummeted because the cost of the things that guarantee a middle class life, like the most modest version of the American dream, a home, a retirement, healthcare, and an education, have absolutely skyrocketed between 400 and 1,000%. So people are working unbelievably hard, sometimes 2, 3 jobs. And yeah, they're making $70,000 a year instead of 30, but they can never afford to be homeowners. And there's only one way to fix that, which is you can't like redistribute your way to that, to the dignity of being able to work really hard and buy a home for your family and retire in dignity. The only way to fix that is to have the market supply them with higher wages. It's the only way. And what happened was, it used to be like doctors married nurses and lawyers married secretaries. And so the median price of a home, I'm talking specifically like where we live, like, in the coast, right? You can be very poor in West Virginia and afford to buy a home. I'm talking about other areas where there's opportunities and jobs. The price of a home used to be tagged at like, a nice middle class income plus. But today what happened is the top 10% marries each other. Now those doctors marry doctors and those lawyers marry lawyers. And Elizabeth Warren wrote the book on this, The Two Income Trap. So the entire housing market is now at the price point that those two doctors can afford, meaning that their cleaning lady can't even afford to rent in their neighborhood. Like what Trump is doing, it's so obvious. He's taking the spigot that was pointed upwards to the top 10% who control over 60% of the GDP now, and he's just going like that. So if you're in that top 10%, 20%, if you have a college degree and a 401k, you're really upset because you've been benefiting all this time. But if you're totally broke because you know that your grandparents worked in the meatpacking plant or in the factory and they were able to afford a middle class life on $30,000 a year, and now everybody in your community is broke, like you're seeing this and you're like, what have I got to lose? Maybe it'll work.
Cody, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. If you don't want to answer, you just say pass. Ready? Do you have a college degree?
Yes.
Do you own a home?
Yes.
Do you own a 401k?
Yes.
How many times did you vote for Trump in the general election of 3?
One.
One. Which one?
The last one.
Where do you live?
San Antonio, Texas.
Welcome in. Thank you for joining, answering all those questions. Tell us what's on your mind.
All driving.
I agree with what was just said related to he's pointing. He's trying to help the lower and middle class. These tariffs are going to bring back jobs, I feel, and I'm really disappointed that we did kind of pull back on it, because I feel that the only way we're going to get this influence for America to bring back manufacturing. I'm in a labor, I'm an aircraft mechanic. I work in aviation maintenance, and, we see jobs get outsourced all the time, and layoffs all the time. It's very up and down. And I'm not worried about my 401k right now. I know there are some people who are closer to retirement that are worried about their 401k, but I'm well diversified in different assets rather than just a 401k. And my opinion on the 401k is it's the elite slush fund, because everybody's retirement is forced to be in this pool for the elite to pump and dump and bring, you know what I mean? This last week was just a dump. And then what did the elites do? They went back in there and they bought the lows, and now they're pumping it back up. So, the 401k is a Ponzi scheme, I think, because they force us all to invest our American dream, which is the retirement, is to be able to retire. The American dream is to be a homeowner, is to retire at an age and enjoy life. But a lot of people nowadays, they can't afford that because their 401k and their retirement is pumped and dumped so many times throughout their life, throughout their whole working class. And, by the time they get to retire, they're 70 years old, 80 years old. And,
Cody, hold on 1 second. Thank you for all that. Steve, do you have a question for Cody?
Well, I did, look, I to both things that were just said recently, I agree we should figure out how to get more money to and help the working class and help the middle class. I wish Donald Trump was for raising the minimum wage. I don't understand why the minimum wage has been stuck where it is for so long. I wish Donald Trump was for getting more people in labor unions so that labor unions had the ability, were strengthened and could negotiate for more defined benefit pensions and less 401ks. There's sort of a whole series of policy options that Donald Trump and the Republicans have not been for, that the Democrats have been for decades. And I don't understand why all of a sudden the answer to this is to put tariffs on other countries, as opposed to let's work with the Republicans who control the Congress and let's raise the national minimum wage to $15 an hour. Let's pass the PRO Act that gives people a better opportunity to join labor unions so that they collectively can bargain and get better benefits and get better money.
Steve, what did Joe Biden do to pass the national minimum wage?
We could pass the minimum wage as long as we didn't have 60 votes in the Senate, because Republicans are against it.
Right, but was it like in every state of the union?
I don't know.
Okay. Batya, question for our driver here.
Okay, this is gonna sound like a funny question, but Cody, are you married? Like you have a great job. But I feel like there's a lot of it's very hard for men now to, you don't have to answer that if it's too personal, but I'm curious what the dating scene is like in San Antonio for a guy like you with a great job and great opinions, and yeah, tell us about that. That's very interesting to me.
Cody's got a track record. He'll answer any question. Cody.
I am married. I've been married to my wife since 2000. Well, it's like 15 years now. We have 2 kids. We have a brand new newborn.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
If you weren't driving, I'd insist on a photo.
Yeah.
Safety first.
And the dating scene here, my brother, he's 30 years old. He has a very good job. He's single. He's interested, but the dating scene here for him is it's very open, I would say. He wants the relationship, but he's having a little bit of issues with it because there's too many women who are promiscuous.
Ooh.
So,
right. I did not expect that to be the answer.
But I would like
didn't either.
I would like to rebuttal to the previous comment. I'm pro unions. I work in a union shop, and the thing with unions is they're not what they used to be. Unions need to be responsible. You have a bunch of hardworking union members, and then you have a bunch of lazy guys too, right? So 20% is doing 80% of the work, and those 80% are just collecting a paycheck. And it is really hard to see the guys doing all the work, going above and beyond for the team, providing a successful work relationship. And and then you see guys who they look over there, they're like, hey man, this guy's just being lazy. So unions had a really good intention, but they've been let go. And I am pro increasing wages. I'm pro being paid a responsible wage, right? We deal with multi-million-dollar aircraft every night. So 100%, yeah, we should be paid a responsible wage versus someone who's flipping burgers and wants to get paid 20 or 30 bucks an hour. And their responsibility is, hey, hopefully I don't burn this 10-cent burger. You know what I mean?
Well, on that point, I'll just say, I think one of the compelling arguments against a minimum wage is that $15 an hour is not actually a living wage. In most cities, you can't afford to rent a 1-bedroom apartment on $15 an hour. So ratifying that across the country just actually does not achieve the goal that we want, which is for people to actually be able to get into entry-level jobs and then work their way up and actually make a living wage. So the idea of and also it doesn't really make sense. Like in Seattle, $15 an hour is basically poverty wages, whereas there are places in the country where actually you would be able to rent a place. So it doesn't really make sense in terms of upward mobility, as a policy.
Yeah. Thank you, Batya. Hey, Cody, did you learn how to fix aircraft in the military?
No. I was in the military. That is correct. Yes.
Where did you get your training after college and the military to fix aircraft?
I went to a college in Denver, Colorado. Well, Broomfield, Colorado, and I got my AMT license.
Got it.
And a lot of people. You had a guy on here a couple of weeks ago from Austin who was upset and talking about the trade, Americans need to get into the trade. You know, carpenters,
Yes, sir.
you know, high skill carpenters get paid
100%. 100%.
You know,
Vital. Cody, thank you for coming on. When we launch Two-Way The Bachelor, we're going to get your brother on here. All right.
I'll let him know.
It's a show on the drawing board, but I think it's going to be huge. And the litigation, when Disney sues us, will get us all the publicity we could ever want. Cody, thank you. Come back regularly. I say the same to Steve and to Batya. Thank you both for coming on. I hope you guys will continue to come back. We love having you on. And Steve, I just love days when Donald Trump's all get partying and you have to parse it carefully. Thank you. Thank you both. Very grateful to you. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, Sean Dan and I will be interesting to see what those two chaps have to say about the president's deal, and we'll gauge the overnight reaction. Of course, see what the Asian markets do. So we'll see you in Europe. So we'll see you at 9 a.m. Eastern time. And then two ways tomorrow. Michael Moynihan, the Moynihan Report. He booked the guest I want, Andrew Sullivan, one of the smartest people any of us have ever seen. Brilliant writer, thinker. 4 p.m. tomorrow, the Moynihan Report. Again, please watch the show. Sponsored by our friends at Fire. Andrew and Michael, sparks will fly. It'll be a great conversation, so you should watch that. And then I'll be back tomorrow night. We were supposed to have Congressman Landsman on tonight, but because the speaker laid on a bunch of votes, that had to be delayed. He'll be here soon. Tomorrow, speaker willing, vote schedule willing, Congressman Lawler of New York, who's been here before and a fantastic guest. Love having him on too. He's no Andrew Sullivan. I don't mean that in a negative way. He's not Andrew Sullivan, but he's Mike Lawler, and he's excellent. So we'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Eastern, and 6 p.m. Eastern for a triple header of Two Ways. Thank you for watching. Very grateful to all of you for being part of the Two Way community, and I'll see you at 9 a.m. Have a good night.